Yeah, it's just a quick question to Matt here. Taking into account your own personal experiences with dementia, how did making this movie help you to work through your process of loss, if at all any?
Well, yeah, I think it did by the end. I mean, the process of actually making it, of getting the money for it, was really long and torturous. I mean, you know, not impossibly long for a film, but it still felt very long. And I think I'd invested so much, you know, emotionally in the project, and on the back of Sex and Drugs, I ended up getting offered a lot of stuff. And I mean, I don't know, I'm sure it's not the same for Ray, but for a lot of people, I think that most of the stuff you get sent is terrible, really bad. So we were going around cap in hand with Ashes, and everyone was saying the same thing. It's really depressing. No one wants to know about Alzheimer's. Oh, what's the point? There's such ugly characters and so on. And I just felt, you know, even on a very low budget, which this is, and a very tight schedule and the rest of it, there had to be someone out there who was going to stick up the cash for it, and there had to be an audience out there. I mean, it's really so kind of moving for me to be able to show the film to you guys today, because you know, I'm sure everyone's had a different experience, and it's not necessarily going to be everyone's cup of tea. But the fact that we're even talking about it now, and that some people who've had similar experiences, or maybe had different experiences, are actually opening up, because it feels like it's still quite a big taboo. At least, you know, when I talk to people about it, people are still very uncomfortable. I know when my dad was ill, talking to people about his illness was a massive thing, and people said, you know, some friends became closer, but a lot of friends kind of distanced themselves because it just didn't know how to deal with it, and it was too awkward. So it was, the initial process was really hard, and I remember like everything seemed to be falling apart at the time, because I basically spent a year turning other stuff down, and then all that stuff started coming out, and then we got close. So Fiona and Esther, the two producers, stuck with me when I think a lot of other producers would have just said, look, do you know what, forget it, it's not happening. And we kept on getting close, and we were going to do it, and we were telling Ray, look, hold on just for a little bit longer, I think we're about to, and then suddenly we weren't doing it again. So that was really tough, and then suddenly being on set, and you know, we had such a great time with Ray and Jim, even though it was a really tough shoot, and there was such a really, like, everyone felt like they were pulling in the same direction. It was like the world's most expensive therapy session or something, because when we came out of it, I felt like a massive weight was off my shoulders. And now we've got to the stage where we finished it, we want to get it out to people, and it's kind of strangely, it almost feels like that weight's back on there, because I want people to see it. And I think quite a lot of the time when I was growing up, I was watching different films, and I had no idea whether they were super popular or no one had ever seen them, or they'd won Oscars, or you know, they'd been consigned to the bin. But I just feel that there's an audience out there for films like this, and I feel like every time I go to the cinema, I end up being offered a lot of the same kind of stuff, and there has to be some kind of gap there for it. And I just think maybe the future is that the usual means of distribution change. You know, I think actually, you know, we need to vote with our feet. There needs to be, well, maybe it's not showing films in cinemas anymore. Maybe it's showing them anyway, and showing that, and people kind of getting together and screening them a different way. Because I think it's got easier and cheaper to make films now, and harder and harder and harder to actually get them to an audience. So that's the next big step for me. But yeah, so even just being here today feels like a massive deal to me, and be able to show it to you guys and talk about it means everything to me.
While we get another hand up on the microphone, moving on, just having on that subject, having somebody like Ray on board, because I read that Ray, you're number 4 in the top 20 of actors and actresses people would go and see no matter what they were in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Number 4. Helen Mirren's number 1.
Oh, I can understand.
Yeah, so, was it Shirley Henderson, number 3? Ooh. Yep. Yes, Shirley Henderson, isn't it? Shirley Henderson.
Oh, right,
yep.
Yeah.
And who was number 2? I've written it down. Let me see, number 2. Oh, that crap actor, Daniel Day-Lewis. He's number 2.
Well,
yeah. Billy Connolly's way behind you as well. Yeah, and Robert Carlyle.
Bobby's blind and kid.
Yeah, but does that help? Seriously, having somebody like Ray in a movie to try and get the money in, to try and get the distribution. I mean, certainly he's not going to harm the movie.
No, quite the opposite. I mean, the film would never have happened without Ray, and you know, it's all kind of it's chicken and egg really. At the moment, you have to try and get an actor on board, but the actor won't come on board unless the money's there. But the money won't be there until the actor comes on board. And you basically do this kind of who's going to jump first, and you know, it takes someone like Ray basically saying that I believe in this project, I'm going to stick with it, no matter what happens with the finance, no matter the ups and downs. I know that, you know, there's something worthwhile and worth sticking with, and that's the way you get a small film made these days. And what the bizarre thing, I mean, I experienced it for the first time on Sex and Drugs. We had, you know, even like some of the small parts, people would say, well, unless you get Toby Jones for that part, even though there's only in 2 scenes, we're not doing the entire film, so we'll pull the entire £2 million budget And the same on this, you know, it was like, and obviously at a certain point, Ray has to go off and do other films. So you're sitting there going, well, inevitably we're going to lose Ray. And then I honestly couldn't think of anyone else I wanted to do the film with. So then you get to a point where, well, then maybe we just don't make the film. So it's really tough. And it was down to, you know, when we first talked about it, I rang Ray. Ray said, "Well, just come over and we'll have a chat about it." And I basically talked at you for probably what felt like about 4 days, but it was probably about 10 minutes.
Yeah, no,
and he just said, "I'm
like
in."
4 days.
But the fact that he stuck with it was and the same with Jim, the same with Leslie. The film would never have happened without them.
Yeah, great cast in it for such a small cast. It was a really good cast of actors there. Hands up, any more questions? There must be. I have never known people from Derry to be so shy. Right, 2 went up at once. 1 at the front, 1 in the second row. Come round the second row. We haven't done this side yet. We'll get back to the front. Gentleman here. Come here. It's always nice to hear also somebody like Ray saying, learning always from the young actors and directors and whatever.
Okay, hello Matt. You've said you've been influenced by your dad's experience and that Ray was a great help on the film. What were you able to draw from other films as well on your experience, you know, while you made the film?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, well, the first thing was really, when we started talking about what kind of film to make and whether it was going to just be a kind of fly-on-the-wall version of what happened to my family, I was thinking, well, actually, what are the kinds of films my dad used to love? My dad used to love gangster films. He used to love thrillers. He used to love, like, real men. He used to love, like, Lee Marvin and Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas, those kind of people. And so I just felt like the straight version of it wasn't really going to be true to what he enjoyed. So it was definitely those kind of the thrillers, trying to do a noir. We didn't actually specifically go back and watch any of that stuff, but I think we've all watched them enough that they're part of your DNA. And definitely David Lynch was part of that. Again, we didn't go back and watch anything specifically. Not that I didn't want to, I just felt if you start watching things with other people from the crew or the cast and you start borrowing shots, then it's too literal. Yeah. So that was my concern. And, you know, David, I mean, you know, Lost Highway is one of my favourite films. I must watch it, you know, every year, and I just, you know, that was something. But again, we didn't look at any specific shots because I was trying to, you know, I think you borrow from things unconsciously anyway. I want to try and avoid that as much as possible. Okay. And then I suppose, yeah, just in terms of the way that I've worked in the past, and the kind of the films I want to try and make, each one seems to be a reaction to the next. So I think I've seen that when I worked with Michael Winterbottom and Andrew Eaton, and other directors that I really admire, like Steven Soderbergh and Paul Greengrass and so on. They're constantly wrong-footing you. You think, oh, okay, I've pigeonholed you. I get the kind of, and then suddenly they go off and do a documentary, or they go and make a film about ballet, or whatever the hell they're going to do. It's always the exact opposite of what you expect, and it was great to go and do, because immediately after Sex and Drugs I got offered every possible biopic music film that was going, and I still do. And Ashes just felt like the antidote to that. Was something that was new and exciting.
So you're saying it felt like the antidote to all the other kinds of things that you were offered?
Yeah, for sure. You end up, you know, you do one music film, and immediately they go, okay, well, every other band, from Freddie Mercury and Queen to, you know, to the Proclaimers to everyone else, that must be, you know, that's what you can do. Which is, I mean, so, you know, actors get typecast all the time, directors get typecast, and sometimes you end up typecasting yourself. You feel comfortable. You go, well, I've done one film, and I know. I mean, all I can ever see whenever I make anything and I watch it again, all I can see is my mistakes. So I just think, well, maybe I can get them right next time. You know, at least it's the same kind of, it's a comfortable world. Mm-hmm. But, you know, this felt very different, and it felt like something that was, a bit like Ray says, a bit scary, a bit out of my comfort zone. I wanted to see if it was possible.
I can't wait to see Mat Whitecross does the One Direction story. Gentleman in the green t-shirt here had his hand up in the front row.
Was the film influenced by Rain Man by any chance? And just want to ask Ray, was it difficult getting into character each day?
Yeah, I guess it was. It's, you know, it's quite a while ago now we've done it, so it's a bit hard to think back. I think we filmed it on the Isle of Man, and it wasn't one of those jobs because we you know, the hours were pretty long, and we had 4 weeks. We had 2 weeks taken off of us. So originally it was a 6-week shoot, wasn't it, Matt? Originally it was 6, though, wasn't it? And then we ended up doing a 4-week shoot. So it's not as if you come home with an evening, go to the bar and get drunk, and then, you know, wake up the next morning and go to work. So you find yourself, when you are coming home, you're kind of in that zone more. So you get back to your room, you sleep, you eat, you sleep, you sleep as much as you can. You're up in the morning, so you're kind of in it all the time. you're there, you know what I mean? It's not like doing a job 9 to 5 on some films where you get home, you know, you have time to get over it, you have a 5-day week and it's all fine. And with this, you was there, so I didn't, you know, at first it was quite terrifying because you're trying to understand if you're doing it right, if you're getting that kind of level where you want to be. And once you're confident that Matt is happy with what you're doing and the rest of the cast and the crew are, you're okay, you let yourself go in. You know, you become confident. I find I'm a very slow starter anyway. The first 2 days, 3 days on a film, I'm still finding my way. And I guess that's the same for most people, but for me, definitely, yeah. But I was kind of there all the time, really. You know, being away from home. It's not as if you're going home and you're going back to the everyday life of living indoors, you know, you're away, so basically that was it, yeah.
Can I just say, Northern Ireland Screen offers great incentives for filmmakers to come to Northern Ireland so you don't need to go back to the Isle of Man.
I was just going to say about Rain Man.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes, the Rain Man photo.
Yeah, no, just with Rain Man. Yeah, it hadn't really occurred to me until we finished the script and someone said, "Oh, two men travelling. One of them has mental illness." So I think that was the it really hadn't occurred to us. And then very specifically again, we didn't go back to it. But the one thing I kept on using it as a reference for whenever we were trying to finance it was that, well, look, that was one of the most popular films of all time. There is an audience out there. It doesn't have to be a usual, the usual romantic comedy or straight thriller. You know, that was, so without actually going back and specifically borrowing from it, I just felt, no one sits there and kind of goes, "Oh, Rain Man, what a depressing film." You think it's really engaging and different and exciting. And actually, the other thing we used as a reference, we kept on being told by people, well, Jim Sturgis' character, let's make him more likeable, let's make him nice person. He does some pretty terrible things to Ray, behaves appallingly. And I was like, well, no, but I'm sure, and I haven't watched it since, but I'm sure the same is true of Tom Cruise. He's a complete arsehole. He treats him terribly. He behaves appallingly, and you stay with him. And actually, the worse he is at the beginning, and the more he redeems himself later on, the better it is. So that felt true for me. And I think that was the other reason when we were casting Jim. I just felt Jim felt perfect for it, and he wasn't available initially, and then he was going to go off and do something else, and suddenly became available. And he's young and vulnerable, and I think other actors who, are really great actors wouldn't have been able to do that, because I think if someone had felt a bit older maybe, or a bit more in control, less desperate, you wouldn't have never forgiven them for everything they do to Ray along the way. So that was important too. But yes, that was only in that sense.
Gentleman in the front row.
I listened earlier and you just said that about your family and your experience of
Hold the microphone up, sir, if you would, so everybody can hear.
Sorry, yeah. And I was thinking about, when you made this film, now that you've made it, do you think that it had some therapeutic value to you? And why I asked the question is, well, you can answer that first and then I'll tell you.
Sure, yeah, and I think, the whole process has ended up being probably the most expensive therapy session of all time, because it was like, initially, and everyone kept on asking, "Are you just doing this for the sake of it?" But I genuinely felt there was something that hadn't been explored in a film that I'd seen before. I definitely felt this was new territory, at least for me. So yeah, I think, you don't make any film just to try and sort out the stuff that's going on in your head, but I think it was more to do with trying to do something positive out of such a negative experience, and trying to show outsiders in the round, all the things you were saying before. I think when Ray does something as simple as stepping onto a curb and crossing a road, for me that's something heroic from his character. Whatever you think about what he's done in the past, and whatever his motivations might have been, whatever man he might have been, when he connects with someone who isn't even his son, who's a complete stranger, then that's something heroic as well. So it was those moments of lucidity and heroism important for me.
Well, I'm sure you must feel that, a measure of the amount of therapy that you got from it is also a measure of Ray's ability to do the part.
For sure. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I thought it was Derek Jacobi sitting down there.
I'll just say something as well from my point of view, watching a director like Matt make a film that is close to his heart it is therapeutic. It was the same for Gary Oldman doing Nil by Mouth, and it was the same for Tim Roth doing Warzone. And there's a reason why people make films about the subject they make them about, and it's why it's a pleasure to work on them, because there's some heart behind it. It's done for the right reasons, I remember in Warzone, I had a terrible moment on Warzone, and it was almost to the extent, why am I doing this film? Why would I on earth want to be involved in this film and the subject matter? And then you sit there and you talk to the people that are making it, and the man who wrote the script, and the man who's directing it, you understand they're doing it, they're making the film for the right reasons, you know, and so it's a pleasure to be involved with these type of films, you know.
And it's lovely to see a subject handled in such a way, because, as you were saying, subjects like that, you can sanitise it, and then what's the point in doing it? And I know it's a gross generalisation to say that, say it was done as an American movie, it would have all been tied up with a red ribbon and chocolate boxy in the end, so it's important not to do that.
Yeah, I think in the depiction, I mean, Ray was absolutely fearless in terms of wanting to look as exactly as the sort of people that he'd met, and not, you know, and down to the fact that, you know, you start dribbling at certain points and you try to come out with a word and it's not the right word. I think we've both seen, certainly this is obviously not true of all depictions about Sanderson TV and film, but we've definitely seen a lot that may try to sugarcoat it, make it palatable, make it a bit dreamy, and sometimes you go a bit, you look a bit wistful and you look to the past and you become a bit childlike, and it felt to me that it was actually, well, my experience and my family's experience was much more gritty, much more difficult. I mean, I never to the point, never had anyone urinating in my mouth, but you know, definitely had some
You're young, it'll happen. You're not married, obviously. Moving on. It's like a therapy session for me. Anyway, any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, indeed. Middle at the front.
I'm just going to say there was obviously some flashes of humour at the start of the film, and that came out of the fact that this guy was losing his faculties. I assume that must come from your own experience with your father. Was there ever any discomfort of the fact that you're treading a fine line? Are you laughing at this guy? Are you laughing at his condition? Like, how did you manage to judge that?
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? That's because I found it as we were doing it. Some of the stuff was hilarious to us, and then I kept on thinking, well, maybe that's because we've earned the right, or I feel I've earned the right because I've been through it and so on. You're not laughing at someone, you're laughing at how surreal the situation is. And there's the gallows humour that comes out of any illness like that, I think. But, you know, we'd sit there, you do it so you avoid cracking up. I mean, I think a lot of people who have tough jobs obviously do it, soldiers or you know, doctors or so on. They have that gallows humour just to get through terrible situations. And I think my family seemed to have it that, you know, we'd be walking with my dad. My dad was you know, really smart, very kind of like very well dressed, very dignified person, and he'd maintain that same air. And you'd be walking along and thinking, why is he being so slow? Walking through a public park, and then you suddenly realise because his trousers had fallen around his ankles, and he'd be basically completely, you know, half naked for the last 3 minutes. And you'd have this moment, all these people staring at you, and the only thing you could do really is crack up. So it wasn't that we were laughing at him; it was just such a fucked up situation. You're just like, well, that's what you can do, otherwise you go crazy. And that's what, you know, me and Ray talked about a lot. Me and Ray would just do stuff in the spur of the moment. You know, he walked past a woman eating her food and nick her, you know, I'd say, well, my dad would have stolen her food, so he'd nick it on the spur of the moment. And those kind of things, that's funny. It's not that you're laughing at someone's disability or their illness, it's more that we have all these conventions that society obviously imposes on us, and then actually someone who ignores all those things because of the way their mind works just cuts straight through them and just says what they think. You know, I remember he'd say things like, you know, someone would sit down and be a real pain in the arse, and they'd just turn around and say, God, you waffle on. And you'd be like, everyone's been thinking about it for the last 20 minutes and you just said it, you know. And the same with Ray, you know, Ray would just, on set, would say whatever was on his mind. So sometimes, even when it wasn't scripted, the same with, you know, Jim trying to get him into the car, for example. You know, Ray just wouldn't go. And those kind of things, there's a kind of weird, horrible humour that comes out of it at times. I mean, it's really interesting to see that people did laugh tonight in most of the places that I was hoping they would, because I don't think it's cruel humour, it's just life can be cruel, and the only way you deal with it is to laugh.
I went to see a friend of mine, this is an awful story, went to see him and he was in the hospice, and it turned out it was just a week before he passed away, and he was telling me, he said, you know, it's awful. He was just tiny and he was in the bed, and he said, it's really awful. These people come and see me and they're talking to me, and I just fall asleep when they're here. And I was, oh, well, you know, Ronnie, it's understandable, all the drugs you're on. He went, no, they're just fucking boring bastards. That's absolutely brilliant, yeah. Thankfully, I just kept kicking him and he stayed awake. More questions?